How to know when to throw in the towel. One question that I think is really helpful to think about this for people that are on the fence and struggling with this question. If you imagine meeting your future self 10 years from now, what would they thank you for? Would they thank you for staying and fighting for this relationship and coming out the other side? Or would they thank you for finally walking away? I think that question can really help you think about your relationship in a big picture way that connects your current moment to your life dreams and your values. And I think sometimes our values have to be stronger than the love that we have for our partner. So today, and I'll say more about that in a little bit, but I want to share with you how you can know for sure what your future self would thank you for. I know firsthand how difficult it is to think about ending a relationship. It's an agonizing decision, especially if you have kids. There's a lot that you've built together, right? It can be a really difficult and guilt-inducing thought process. You might be asking, is this just a bad patch that we're going to get through, right? We hear about marriages where they have a few really bad years and then they come out the other side and they're so glad they did it. Is that the situation that I'm in? Or is this a situation where it's like, it's just not getting any better? And how do you know where that line is? So to help with gaining clarity, there are 5 things that I'm going to get into that I think can help you gain clarity around when you know it's time to walk away from the marriage because your health and the quality of your life and your family generational legacy is on the line. Sometimes we do have to choose the health of our family, the health of ourselves. Our kids need us to be healthy, right? So ultimately prioritizing our health and well-being is a gift to everyone that needs us or everyone that we love. And sometimes we do have to make that more important than the love that we feel. Love is not enough to keep a relationship healthy. Let's say you've done everything that you can and things are still not getting any better. You're still stuck, or maybe even things are getting worse. The healthier you get, then now is the appropriate time to consider, do we need to part ways? So the 5 most fundamental things that I think generally indicate that a relationship is not viable to stay in because it's not going to be healthy. The first thing is that if your spouse has significant narcissistic traits. Now, most people do have narcissistic qualities. Everybody has some of them. But what I'm referring to is like a chronic and predictable pattern of a lack of empathy, an inability to take personal accountability, an inability to ever say they're sorry, an apparent commitment to misunderstanding you, where you feel like you're working so hard to communicate and they just keep misunderstanding you. This also includes gaslighting, emotional manipulation, and just an ongoing disregard for how you feel and your emotional safety. That's really what I'm talking about. Is there a chronic pattern of feeling like my partner never really understands me? They never really empathize. I always feel alone. And anytime I bring up anything, it's going to get flipped back onto me. That's really a big red flag. It won't work. Personality disorders are considered a precondition. So what that means is if you're with somebody like that, it doesn't matter how perfect you are. It doesn't matter how much work you've done. It doesn't matter how good you get at communicating, how good you get at emotional regulation, all the things that you're working on. You'll find that it just doesn't make a dent. They're not going to allow you to be successful. And so in that case, if you stay in the relationship, you just have to know what the limitations are, and you will be making sacrifices and dishonoring at least parts of yourself. And of course, I don't think that's worth it. I never recommend that, but I also do respect that sometimes people do have to make that choice if there's other extenuating circumstances that require them to stay. The second thing is if your spouse suffers from an acute, untreated mental illness or mental health condition or addiction. It could be like an addiction to alcohol. It could be an addiction to gambling. It could be a porn addiction. Anything that is considered self-medicating that is constantly getting in the way of accountability and a relational health and true connection. It's not the addiction in and of itself. It's, are they willing to acknowledge that they need help and get the help that they need? If they are, then it's not a precondition. But if they're not willing to get the help or they say it's really not an issue, then your relationship cannot be healthy because they're not healthy, right? You can still love them and you can still care about their well-being, but you don't have to stay with them. You don't have to be under the same roof, and you can love them from afar and you don't have to enable them. Sometimes there's guilt around this, like if this person is struggling with an addiction, I don't want to abandon them. But there are ways that you can set things up where they have the supports that they need, and it doesn't have to be you, even if they think that it does. If you're also dealing with somebody who has a mental illness, like maybe they're bipolar and they're unmedicated, if you're managing a situation like that and you feel really compelled to stay in it, you might want to look at what is the secondary gain and look into codependency resources. A lot of times when we stay in a caretaker role, or we think that we can help somebody, or if we think that they need us and we know that it's not healthy, but we feel that we just can't leave, we will not give ourselves permission, even though the cost is very high. That's when we have to look at codependency stuff. I recommend Pia Melody. You can look her up. Have a look at like what in me is keeping me here. Sometimes we have vulnerabilities that make us susceptible to people with preconditions. So it's important to recognize they're the ones with the precondition, not you. But if there's something in you that makes it very hard to unhook from that, that's on your side of the street. That's worth looking at. And sometimes you can't even really look at that deeply or thoroughly or honestly until you're in a separation or you're not under the same roof with this unhealthy person. Another indication, this is the third thing that I noticed that will tell you that it really could be time to break up, is if the relationship is bordering into abusive. Obviously, if it's straight up abusive, there's no gray area there for me at all. It's dangerous. Abuse only escalates. It doesn't get better. You're actually in more danger when you leave. I also just want to say I am distinguishing between occasional abusive behaviors, like an emotional outburst or saying something mean, right? That like a verbal attack that can happen occasionally, that doesn't make them an abuser. When I'm talking about an abuser, I'm talking about the cycle of abuse. It's really about the consistent need to have power and control of access to you, control over what you do, control over who you're hanging out with, control over what kind of inputs you're getting, what you have access to. Like it could be, of course, physical violence, but it can be emotional abuse. It can be social isolation. It can be financial control and abuse. It can be shaming and gaslighting, which has you walking on eggshells. You're afraid to speak your truth or set a boundary because there will be hell to pay, right? You hold back because it's just safer not to say anything. And then you have to choose between safety and authenticity. That's not healthy in general, but especially when you're dealing with the cycle of abuse. So the cycle of abuse is where there's some really good times. And after they've behaved badly, they express remorse. They're sorry. They reconnect. You feel very loved again. You feel back in the fold. Everything's great. You figured all about it. And then it starts all over, right? That's what I'm talking about when I talk about abuse in a relationship. If your partner's abusive and they can recognize, you know what, I have a problem and I need to get some help. I've got anger issues. That's one thing. But if they're saying that they don't have a problem, that it's something you did that made them behave that way, and they're externalizing their locus of control onto you, and they're not taking accountability, you can be sure that it won't get better. In my experience, abusers never want to get individual counseling. They always want to get couples counseling. But it's actually not clinically indicated to do couples counseling when there's abuse in the relationship, because one person isn't going to feel safe opening up to the counselor with the other person present. And counselors can be snowed by an abusive partner. You can be the most charming, articulate abuser and nobody's going to know, right? It's only behind closed doors. So if your partner is behaving abusively and saying that they want to do couples counseling, but they will not do individual counseling, you definitely have the green light to walk away without any guilt. Because, I mean, I've been doing this a long time. There's a lot of research out there about it. There's no arguing about this. It is not even appropriate for a couples counselor to take a couple where one person is abusing the other. It's just that usually they don't know that. Now, one caveat too is if you recognize yourself in this situation and you think, you know what, I do need to leave this relationship, make sure if you're with somebody who's abusive that you don't let them know that you are leaving. You get your ducks in a row. And I'm not even just talking about physical violence. I'm talking about people who are going to fight dirty. This also includes narcissists. They will fight so dirty in court. They will take your passport. They might take the children's passports. They might take things like documents that you need in order to establish some kind of independence. The point that I'm trying to make is that you have to be very strategic. Where I see a lot of people get this wrong is that they finally do find the courage to leave, but then they tell their abusive partner that they're going to leave. And when you do that, they are going to pull you back in. Even if you finally have the clarity to leave, they're going to have more leverage to stop you or to prevent you in logistical ways and just make everything way, way harder for you. So make sure that you really keep your cards close to your chest. The fourth thing is if you've agreed upon a monogamous relationship and they're having an outside romantic relationship, or even if it's just a friendship or they become a primary friend and they are confiding in them about you, or you know that they're trash talking you to this person, or you know that they're saying things about you to them that you're not privy to. Now you're on the outside and that other person is on the inside. That's a betrayal, right? I believe that's 1000% a reason why you could end the relationship, because they've already made the choice to dishonor your agreement, to disregard your vows. And they also, especially if they're doubling down on it, if you say, look, I'm not comfortable with this, and they're like, you're too sensitive, get over it, there's nothing, and they're not at all taking it seriously, then they've betrayed you and they're not even wanting to be part of the healing process. So it's a double whammy. The betrayal is one thing, but then not participating in trying to repair that betrayal and doing whatever it takes to do that there's nothing there for you. Like, what are you then fighting for, right? What are you fighting for or you're just going to have more of the same. And I think sometimes it's hard to accept that because there's always this fantasy that they will eventually see the error of their ways and wake up and apologize. But in my experience, that doesn't happen while you're still there. It happens when you leave and you've drawn strict boundaries and you've removed yourself from something that is not to standard. It is not within your values. And so it's a boundary thing, right? So I guess I just want to validate that because I hear this a lot. Like, well, my spouse has this best friend, who I feel like is more important to them than me. Or I feel like they're talking about me behind my back. That's a big no-no. And I think that is not just a betrayal. It's not just hurtful. It is a sign of something deeper. And that's a precondition too. You have no leverage when they are getting their attachment needs met outside the relationship. No leverage at all. Let them go. Let them have their attachment needs met outside the relationship. Because once you're on the outside and they're confiding to other people about you and they're putting other people on the inside instead of you, I mean, it's not a reflection on you at that point. That's a reflection on their character. So just hold your head high and walk away and leave him to or leave her to whatever they think is okay that isn't okay for you. Those are just beneath your standards. And then the final reason that will help you know that it's time to break up is when you realize that you have a different life dream. So this is a little bit different. This is not a precondition. This is not like this person has a characterological flaw. There's no pathology here, right? This is simply just, we want different things. And the things that I need in my life to fulfill my life dreams and my calling are actually mutually exclusive to my partners. So for me to get what I need, they would have to be compromising themselves too much. Or for them to get what they need for their life dreams from a conscious, intentional place, right? Not from a maladaptive place, would have to cause me then to compromise what's really important to me. And that's really not something you want for people that you love. So let's say your life dream is to have children and your partner doesn't want to have children. You can't make somebody have a child. Like whoever says no to that is going to win because there's only going to be resentment and it's only going to cause problems down the line. So then you'd have to really ask yourself, is that something I'm willing to sacrifice? If you can say wholeheartedly yes and not have resentments, well then great, then that's your choice. But if you think that saying yes to that is going to cause resentment in the long term, it's not worth it. And sometimes you think you won't have resentment, but then you still do. So you have to be very, very, very careful with this one. And the thing to realize too about this and remember is that it doesn't make anybody wrong. Another example would be like, I really want to live in the country and my spouse really wants to live in Manhattan. Well, we could compromise and say we're going to live in the suburbs, but then neither of us is happy, right? So how do we come to that decision? Now, sometimes you can find a way to say, we're going to take turns. I'll have my life dreams for these 5 years, and then for the next 5 years, it'll be your way, and you can alternate. If you can do that, fantastic. But I'm talking about situations where you've come to the table many times, you've tried to negotiate your differences, and what you ultimately realize is that the kind of life and the kind of relationship that my partner wants to have is fundamentally so different from the kind of life and relationship that I want to have that there's no way that we can both be happy. And if it doesn't work for both of you, it doesn't work for either of you. So that's it. Those are the 5 things that I think are the biggest reasons why it's okay to walk away from a relationship for the sake of your health, for the sake of living your life dreams, because I do think that we all have callings. I do think that we all have our own paths. This is just my belief. You might not agree. I think we all have a spiritual path, whether or not we even identify as being spiritual or having a spiritual path. It's just that sometimes we just know, like, this is not for me, right? This is not for me, and this is for me. And sometimes when we feel pulled into a direction, that's a calling, and it's something that we should listen to, and that there is something relational and healthy about honoring ourselves. Because like I said at the beginning of this talk, when we are honoring ourselves and filling up our cup and lighting ourselves up with our purpose and fulfilling our life dreams, we are a blessing to everybody that we love, to everyone in our orbit. And so it's not like you're saying no to relationships by walking away from a marriage. It's more like saying, I'm going to prioritize different relationships that are going to be more supportive to what I'm here for in this life. Now, ideally, you would know this before you get married, right? That this would have been thought through. Marriage has evolved over time. There were times where people didn't get divorced because it was considered a disgrace, or it was against God, or it was against whatever your faith is, because there are many different faith traditions that would frown upon walking away from a relationship. But when we're talking about violating the dignity of another human being, I don't think it's worth it. I think it's not right. This is my opinion. So I welcome people to disagree with me. That's no problem. I think that it's okay to say honoring the health and dignity of each person in the relationship has to be most important, because that is what teaches the next generation. And generational trauma just gets carried out if we don't break the cycle. So sometimes walking away from a dysfunctional, unhealthy, toxic marriage is the best thing that you can do to break the cycle for your children and for your grandchildren and so on. And it takes an enormous amount of courage. And the person who really does, as Terry Real, turn around and face the flames that have been rolling down through the generations, it is a hero's journey. It takes an enormous amount of courage, but it is a gift to the next generation. And we change the world that way, one family at a time, one person at a time. I'm not here to advocate divorce. I'm here to keep marriages together. That's what I do. But there are times where people do ask the question, what do I do in this situation? Is it okay? Like, how do I know when it really is time to walk away? So that's why I wanted to have this conversation today. And that's it. If anybody wants to do a deeper dive on this, you can book a call at monikahoyt.com/talk. That is a free call. There's no obligation, but it really is just a deeper dive around your situation if you're trying to gain some clarity.